This video will provide a snapshot of IBI Chapter 6, which is entitled The Goal of Interpretation. Under the heading Speech Acts, the writers of our textbook will distinguish locution, illocution, and perlocution. While it may appear to some to split hairs too finely, do notice what these terms mean. Under the heading Levels of Meaning, the writers will take up the puzzle of how New Testament writers handled or interpreted specific Old Testament passages. In particular, Matthew's use of a passage from Hosea 11. It's an interesting puzzle, perhaps one that you have wondered about. Notice the 5 different ways to explain what Matthew is doing with the Hosea passage. Fundamental to this discussion is our quest to rest our interpretation on authorial intent. The puzzle is this: did Hosea intend what Matthew interprets from that prophet's oracle? Under the heading Author-Centered Textual Meaning, the writers underscore that we are on the most solid foundation when the interpretation we present is grounded in what the biblical author intended, in contrast to focusing on reader-oriented interpretations. Having said that, some recent reader-oriented interpretations have brought to light issues of biblical justice that had suffered insufficient notice. Under the heading, The Place of the Reader in Constructing Meaning, the writers take up 2 topics of interpretation where you will recognize that Christians have drawn different interpretive conclusions. Notice how the IBI authors critically reflect on how people arrive at differing destinations in these specific issues. Under the heading Validating Our Interpretation, the authors then press the question, how can we know whether or not an interpretation is valid? Again, they point us to the outlook that presumes that the biblical writers wished to be understood and so employed the convention of ordinary language, ordinary literature, with the hope that people would understand what they said or wrote. In addition, notice what Swartley says about the praxis of faith as a means of validating an interpretation, as well as, depending on the discernment of the believing community, we should not engage interpretation in a vacuum. On page 286, the writers stress once again, quote, the most historically defensible interpretation has greatest authority, end of quote. Finally, notice their call to differ charitably on non-essentials while remaining firm on orthodoxy. Now, be sure to read the entire chapter to understand the fuller picture of what we have condensed in this snapshot.